Okay, so good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's webinar. So this is a follow-up to the webinar that we did just after Easter there a couple of weeks ago in relation to the circumstances that were facing farmers at the time. And we said that night that we'd follow up in due course because it's a difficult season this year, throwing up a few different challenges across the whole country depending on where you are. So tonight we're going to try and be a bit quicker than we were the last night. We went on a little bit longer than we planned the last time, but there was good interaction and we'd hope to have that good interaction with you again tonight. The topics that we're going to discuss are feeding the herd to maintain the milk solids production. And I suppose that's motivated by the fact that there's a lot of people concerned that they may not have hit the peak that they've achieved in previous years and they're worried about their overall milk supply for the season ahead. And Joe Dunphy is going to talk about the grass side of things, I suppose, in particular in relation to that. So grass quality is going to be a very important piece in trying to maintain milk solids production for the summer. And we're also joined by Evan Hunt, and Evan is a dairy farmer in Sligo, and is also one of the winners of the Grassland Farmer of the Year competition categories there recently. And Evan's going to share his insights and opinions on the situation currently as well. And then I suppose the other thing that's probably the elephant in the room in a lot of cases is that the winter feed situation is a concern for people. Again, Joe is going to show some figures to show that we're a little bit behind in terms of our current growth rates, and that obviously potentially may be impacting on certain farms in relation to their winter feed budget for 24-25. So I suppose we'll get stuck into it. So Joseph Dunphy is part of the Grass 10 team. I suppose I better call you Joseph tonight, Joe, so as not to be getting mixed up with Joe Patton. So I'll hand over to you, so Joseph.
Perfect, Stuart. Perfect, Stuart. Thanks a million. And again, look, good evening to everyone that's joining us. I think, look at Stuart, yeah, kind of summarised it very, very well from the start. Difficult season so far. It is I suppose an understatement. Like, if we look very, very quickly, and we won't dwell on it too long. If we take a look at I suppose the growth curve from pasture based, that's I suppose there's a lot of information that's been built into this down through the years. And we have a 5-year average. There's the purple bar, and the I suppose the piece on the left-hand side of your screen doesn't probably show it to the extent that it is. But like, if we look over on the right-hand side, the bottom of the right-hand side, if we look at the growth rates there, the five-year average, we were growing 55 kilos of dry matter at the end of April, Stuart. And at the 14th of May, the newsletter today, when I was digging out when the figures came over from pasture base, the dairy figures, Stuart, this morning were 57. So if you want to take, we're probably 3 weeks behind so far this year.
Yeah, so effectively looking at 25-30% reduction in growth, or kind of lag in growth, really, Joe.
Yeah, just as you said, very like other years there. If you even see like back to 2022, or the 9th of May there, we're growing 72 on average. 2023 there, 14th of May this week last year, 73 been grown on farms, and we're still just struggling in the high 50s there at the minute, Stuart.
Yeah, and like that's, you have the predictions there from the newsletter as well, obviously up in the top right hand corner there of the screen for the coming week, and it's a better picture further north. It seems to have been a real challenge. The lads will be joking me about the fact that I'm very south focused down this area, but like, it's been a challenge for all the way through the spring for the southern area in terms of the high levels of rainfall, lower growth rates now again, and there's better growth rates up the country, it seems. And there's a possible suggestion that might be down to maybe a shortage of nitrogen even.
Yeah, it's something, Stuart, that I suppose when they're looking at the prediction model, and Elodie has been coming out with the figures weekly. She has been saying that in certain parts of the country, the lack of nitrogen, or maybe nitrogen being behind, is having an effect on growth rates. And I suppose we'll get to it in a minute. I suppose it's not about catching up in terms of nitrogen, but it's important to feed the plant. We get the best response to nitrogen during April, May, and June. So it's important to get back on track, and we'll chat about that in a few minutes.
And Joe, is there much of an influence in terms of the grazing management throughout the spring, obviously, in terms of that effect on growth as well? Like, so again, just with the southern focus from the point of view of what I see myself, like farms that would always have been out grazing in the springtime this year were struggling to get out. So is there like, and we had that heavier cover carried over then from the autumn as well. Has that killed the growth rate a little bit too?
Yeah, it probably had an effect, and maybe with some very heavy covers there. It's probably the double whammy there, Stuart, of covers not getting grazed off, in maybe some covers not grazed since late September. And then when they were grazed off, and maybe in some situations, grazed badly, there was a dead material, a lot of dead material there in the springtime, which is probably going to, to reduce growth rates.
Okay. So
So
what's
yeah,
your
so
thinking?
yeah, so look at, yeah, just I suppose, just on the predictions there, as we said, we're probably still are that couple of weeks behind in terms of where we would like to be. So it's important for people just to, to take stock of that for the next couple of weeks. We're still probably going to be growing high 60s, to mid 70s, depending on your farm. And I just want to make the point that, in general, not to get too hung up on the exact figures from the prediction model. Use it as a guide for your farm. In general, there's some very good farms that are being used in the prediction model. Use it more of a, I suppose, of a trend, that if it's grow 10 to 10, if it's to say to grow 63, but for your area, but last week it was 53, there's a 10 of a difference in that. Therefore, your farm will probably grow 10 more. So don't take it as an absolute on the figures. It's more of the trend that it's going to be 5 more or 10 more, or, to that extent.
Yeah, very good. So I suppose you're going to move on to, there's kind of two situations on farms. There's the situation where grass is tight, obviously, as you have up there on the slide, and then there's a situation where we may be moving into surplus, which you can see with those 84s and 90s that have been predicted for further up the country, which is going to be an issue for people up there.
Yeah, so there's both situations there. Probably people with slightly higher stocking rates, or people maybe that, we're struggling a couple of weeks ago. Weather still having a big impact, lower growth rates there throughout the latter part of the second rotation, and then just still high stocking rates, and just struggling, Stuart, to really get back on track again. Like, so, we're probably seeing, if this situation was probably worse last week, but with the good growth over the last couple of days, it's probably rescued some farmers out of it. But we're still probably looking at 15 or 20% of farms, Stuart, that have lower pre-grazing yields, less than 1,300, lower cover per cow of, less than 160 kilos of dry matter per livestock unit. And I suppose the key message for this week is, it's all about watching that demand figure, okay, and I suppose understanding that demand figure, or what happens in terms of understanding between growth and demand. If every difference between, if we 15 of a difference between growth and demand. So if we're growing, 60, and say the demand, say 75, or 70 or 75, say there's a 15 of a difference. Like, that's going to take in around 100 off our average farm cover every week. So, we have to, make changes to that demand figure, when we're doing our weekly walk on pasture base, to allow for that. Okay. We must set the farm up. We must keep an eye on rotation length these days if we're still tight, 20 to a 22 day round, and supplement accordingly. And look at, if it's to just say 40 hectares, like 1.8 hectare per day, but or it's 12 points, 12 and a half hectares per week. Don't get, I suppose, overly hung up on the day figure, but just kind of keep it right per week. Um, as I said already, the demand needs to be low enough to allow the farm to grow out of it, and, keeping the animals, if we can, on 24-hour allowances, so that we don't, maybe you're not maybe restricting on wires all the time. So we still have to give them an area, but not restricting every break.
So what you're saying there, Joseph, is that you're basically giving them a full feed once every two feeds, ideally.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And
And just
it,
on the stocking rate piece, then, just like, where that demand, like, people need to be careful about setting the demand as well. Like, you've a few slides that you want to share there in relation to that in a minute, I think, as well. But it's just like that tight grass situation could be kind of self inflicted in a couple of cases, maybe on foot of what I said already about the fodder situation, and people maybe trying to take out more ground for silage than they should, maybe.
yeah, and I suppose it is an issue where we're after, we've had I suppose, a long winter essentially, and, you know there is, and we can, I can understand the argument of wanting to maybe stock up a milking platform, but if we do it to the detriment of probably grass quality, in terms of putting pressure on cows, putting pressure on everything, we will suffer, over the next couple of weeks in terms of, not realizing the true potential of what the cows can produce if they're, if we don't correct grass quality, which is becoming a little bit of an issue even over the weekend. Since it's a few warm days, we are starting to see grass just, begin to start stemming, maybe paddocks not grazed as well, Stuart, throughout the springtime, beginning to, that growth, the base of the sward is beginning to go a little touch. So we need to allow a bit of fat in the system to correct grass quality as we're going through.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
So
So
the
again,
surplus situation, so like that's the nice position to be in reality, I suppose. Well, there's two sides to it, I suppose. If you're tight on grass, it means that you're probably grazing quality grass. You should be grazing quality grass, notwithstanding what you just said about that bit of stem coming into it. But if you have a surplus of grass, you really do have to manage it and actively manage it, and it's probably going to be an important piece in terms of actually trying to do what we're talking about in terms of delivering that milk solids production. You have to stay on top of it from the
yeah.
get-go.
Yeah, so look at, I suppose, we talked about people who are in a surplus grass situation, probably, greater than what we said, the 160, 170 kilos dry matter per hectare, nice position to be in. If we talk about like right surpluses, it probably maybe when we're getting over 190 to 200 kilos of dry matter per livestock unit there, Stuart. And maybe when, as we said, the pre-grazing yield is beginning to become a little bit of an issue, when we're kind of going into 16, 1700s like that. That's where the issues begin to be. But like, it's back to that. It's the growth versus demand thing that's probably happened. It's probably where it's beginning to where the surplus is beginning to come on, or maybe people with 50 of demand on the farm there at the minute. At the minute, Stuart, they're probably growing 65 again. It's back to that. It's probably 15 of a difference in between growth and demand by 7 days. It's 100 on the average farm cover every week. And if we were to divide that, if we're stocked at around 3 points, something that's probably putting in around 36 kilos of dry matter per livestock unit on every week. So that's bringing you from that 160, 170 to that 200 of a cover per livestock unit, over the next 7 days. So it is important to, I think there was probably a situation there, Stuart, where people weren't walking the farm every week because it was probably nearly demoralizing at one stage when there was lower growth rates. But when we do get to this time of the year, it can change very, very fast. So it's getting back into that habit of that, if it's a weekly walk you do, ideally, if you're doing a weekly one on pasture base, you'd probably want to be going around, and maybe on a Friday, if you're doing it on a Monday, go around again on a Friday and have a quick look at the next 3 or 4 paddocks to graze. Some people that are, very, very good at this, they do 6 measures a month now for May and June, Stuart, in terms of, just really keeping on top of it in the coming weeks.
And Joseph, I
And again,
suppose, yeah, you see the advantage of doing that will be evident on the farms that do it, because they manage to maintain that protein rise, or they don't get maybe the dip that you might see on a lot of farms. I know that yourself and John Maher would often find it can be difficult actually to find farms that are successfully managing that transition from the heading stage through to back to the normal stage of normal grass growth once heading out has happened. So it's that regular walking, and we'll say you're managing the heading phase by cutting the surplus, and that's what people should be trying to do.
Yeah, and it's going to be a multitude of things that are going to correct the surplus, this grass situation on farms. As we said already, there's going to be issues over the coming weeks, and coming back to the stock and rate piece, it's about leaving the bit of fat in the system so that we can correct when it comes to it. And it will be a bit of baling, Stuart. It will be, a small bit of dismowing after grazing the odd paddock, maybe 1 or 2 paddocks per week, sort of thing. Like, what we want is that we want leaf, 1400 covers, and we'll be confident then we're going to get milk solids from grass. That's our objective, really, over the next kind of 3-4 weeks, anyways, like, until we get past heading dates.
Yeah,
like.
you're actually allowed to say the T word, Joseph. It's okay.
Well, you see, if we talk about tough, and I'm afraid some people are going to Could top it up,
Get a
top it
topper.
this high.
Yeah, topping with a Dismore.
You have to say it, yeah, top it with a
Skin
Dismore.
it. No point in doing cosmetic stuff.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it has to be. And again, you know, it not every paddock is going to be able to be baled. It's going to have to be a mix and match of both there, Stuart, like
Yeah,
over the coming weeks. Like,
definitely with the way the situation has been this year, Joe. Like there's such variation in the way grass is growing now, like highs and lows. Lots of ground. I hear some of the advisors saying there, and some of their own clients that we're looking at with this heat now and with the damp that we've gotten in the last couple of days, that you're probably going to get everything rising up together. And that means that you're going to have to do a combination of what you just said in terms of baling and topping, because you can't correct it all in one go, but you do need to kind of correct it.
yeah, yeah. So no, it is going to become an issue, but it's just trying to deal with it and use the, as we said, the constant walk and the walking every 5 days now to make better decisions on the farm.
Yeah. So the sweet spot, tell me about this. This is what I was saying about trying to pitch your demand at the right level. We're really trying to emphasize this to people this year, especially in light of the fact that, as we've already said, people are going to try to stock up on area, maybe with a view to making more silage. May not be the way to go, or probably isn't the way to go, because it's going to put too much pressure on.
Yeah, and I suppose look at it's some information that was dug out there recently, Stuart, in terms of, we start on the right hand side of the page. If we look at the growth curve, and I suppose it's not an average from say everyone on pasture based, Stuart. It's kind of like it's a match sample of farmers that are doing what we want. They're doing the 35-40 measures. They're with us, with pasture base a long time, so that we know the information that's coming out of them is good. And if we look on the right hand side, what we're seeing in recent years, Stuart, over the last 5 years, is that, maybe it's down to nitrogen that was probably previously being spread, and we're getting a lot of 90s or 100 kilos of growth rates on farm. But if we look at a 5 year average there, Stuart, from the 9th of May there to the 13th of June, there's very few weeks that were very steadily kind of growing over 65 to 70 kilos of grass on average. Like, there is going to be outliers of weeks, but in general, we're not seeing those very, very, very high growth rates that we were previously. So, as we were talking about earlier, Stuart, it might have been a situation where, there was higher nitrogen mounts going out on farm. People were getting the surplus grass, baling. They were nearly baling every week for 5 or 6 weeks, because they were growing 75, 80, 85, kind of 90 all throughout, May, and throughout the middle part of June, and there's probably a few more cows on platforms as well now, Stuart. So, but what we're seeing now is that, if we do go to the high stocking rates on farm, and we're aiming to, go for reasonably low meals, and we're driving stocking rates up, and then I suppose the demand per hectare is going to be, if we're driving that up to 70, 75, it's a very high performing car, Stuart. Like, it's kind of on, it's full tilt all the time. If we get a low week, a cool week, the first week of June, if we do an extra paddock a baling, and we or a paddock, we top a paddock, and we drop back 15 or 20 in growth rates, all of a sudden the farm is under pressure. So and as I said, we have to allow this year for some corrective action to be made on farm, in terms of maintaining. Maybe people aren't happy, maybe where they got to peak milk production, maybe they're a little touch behind on other years, but we have to make sure that we get the grass quality right over the next couple of weeks to maintain whatever peak we've got to. And if we stock it up very high and are not able to take out as many paddocks as we want to correct that, it's going to become an issue. Okay, so like, if we want to offer 17 kilos of grass there, Stuart, like, so if we take 65, we divide it by 17, you're probably looking at somewhere in around 3.7, 3.8 of a stocking rate there.
Yeah.
So
Just before you go on there, Joe, like the sum that we were doing earlier as well, just to put it in context, because it's probably a more relatable figure. I know there's nothing wrong with what you're saying in terms of that 15 kilos or 20 kilos of a difference. But if we take our standard kind of 100-acre farm, like, you're talking about 25, 30 bales a week with an excess growth of 15 to 20 kilos. So if you were getting that in the past and you're no longer getting that, now the silage budget is going to come under pressure. You know, it's probably a question for Joe in a minute when he comes to talk about the winter feed stock, but that quality feed, and I know some people would suggest that stuff isn't probably quality feed either, because it's actually kind of, you're not really willing to feed it to the milking cow as in the fresh farm. So why would you feed it to them in a bale of silage? But like it's still surplus silage that was being generated off of platforms, and isn't any longer being generated in a lot of cases.
Yeah, it might be what you were generating over 4 or 5 weeks, Stuart, years ago. It might be happening in 2 weeks now, or and another thing that's probably leveled sometimes, Stuart, is the fact that you said that figure there of, we were multiplying it out earlier for a 40-hectare farm, it's 25 or 30 bales. Some people would say, well, I don't like bales. I don't want to be dealing with bales. But like the reality is that we're going to have to do some sort of correcting. Like we need to use the bales, to do that. And it's kind of a double whammy of we're getting a bit of surplus off the platform, but it's also correcting for us. So I think we have to get to a situation where you're going to have to start liking drawing a few bales,
Therapy. So yeah, so your 3.7, 3.8 is your kind of sweet spot in that sense then, Joe.
Yeah, and look, if you do end up maybe driving it up to over 4 or something like that, try and make it be a short-term decision that is maybe for, a week or 10 days now, 2 weeks, as we kind of come towards peak growth. We're probably about 10 days, 2 weeks away from peak growth now. We'll probably get it the next 2 weeks. So don't, do it, take out your surplus and reduce the stocking rate back again. Try not leave it in the situation, in the system for a couple of weeks into June or something like that. Try and maintain it. Try and reduce it back down and maintain it at that kind of 60 65 of demand for when we get into June.
Okay, so just a question there, Joe. I don't know whether you have the answer for me now or not, but if you were given the 24-hour allocation that you're talking about, should you be trying to go into that full allocation in the evening or in the morning to try to get better utilization of higher sugars in the grass? Have you come across any comment on your travels about that in the past? And I just, while you're thinking about the answer to that one, maybe we might just encourage people to come in with the questions there through the Q&A. We're happy to take them there.
Yeah, look, it's not going to work. Now, not every paddock is going to be, a 24-hour allocation on your farm. It was more to highlight that there will be some three grazing allocations, depending on paddock sizes. I think the key message is that we're not pinching on a wire, every grazing. Like that's kind of that was the message. Like, and if you're on a 3 grazing, like it might still be, holding 15-20%. Well, that's if you're in surplus, it'd be holding that maybe 15-20% at the back end of a paddock for that third grazing or something like that to give them a bit of a fresh bite.
Yeah, sure. In that tight situation, effectively, you're holding a fixed area per day, and you're just saying to give that area over the course of 2 grazings rather than dividing that area into 2.
Yeah. So that's, I suppose, from my point of view. We'll move on just onto the fertilizer, Stuart. But it's just to get a handle on that point that we're just not growing the feed, we're not growing the peaks. And look, I think it's important if you have 30, 35, 40 measures on pasture base over the last couple of years, go back, have a quick look. What were you growing a few years ago? What are you growing the last year or two? Maybe it's coupled with higher fertilizer price the last couple of years. Maybe it's the in allowances now that are putting you under pressure. But see what's your farm growing? What are you growing throughout the peak times? What we are seeing from the pasture based figures is that it is less than what we were growing a couple of years ago.
Okay, so talk about fertilizer. So a lot of concern around this I suppose, from a point of view of actually trying to adhere to the regulation in terms of what's allowed and so forth. But also, I suppose, from our perspective, we're concerned that people aren't going to spread enough of it because of being afraid of the regulation. So you need to know what you're allowed to spread, and then spread carefully what you spread that carefully then, I suppose, to make sure that you get the best return for it when you do spread it.
Yeah, so look, it's, there's been such a huge variation, Stuart, in terms of what's gone on this spring. There's people who, I suppose, with smash and grab and maybe took the opportunities when they came and kind of are reasonably on track with slurry and with fertilizer. There's people who kind of were late getting out but kind of have somewhat got back on the bandwagon again. And there's some people who are still, we're still a fair bit behind. And as we said already, from what Elodie and stuff, Elodie has looked at, like it still is affecting growth on some farms. So I suppose if we're at, if we look at the table and like we have at the 212 kilos of 2 kilos of chemical per hectare, which is 170 units, like it is the advice is that we have somewhere around 32 kilos or 26 units for the month of May. So if you're in grass surplus there, Stuart, with ideally we're looking at 0.8 of a unit a day at the minute. So it's kind of, 21 day round, we're kind of looking at that 16, 17 units ideally of a nitrogen plus a sulfur product at the minute, something to likes of a 30, 38 plus 7, kind of just shy of a half a bag of that is it's a nice product. I suppose probably for planning out for people who are a little bit behind on fertilizer applications, it's probably no harm, when we talk about we get better bang for our buck at this time of the year now, as we've got higher soil temperatures up now at 13, 14 degrees. Good bang for our buck at this time of the year from fertilizer, up that rate a little bit, okay, so apply instead of 32, kilos per month, we want to be going within around 40 kilos per month if you're a little bit behind. So just pushing that up to a minimum that it should be kind of in around a unit a day, okay, and so 40 kilos for the month, 32 units, which is kind of just a little bit stronger, Stuart, just to kind of push the farm on. It's a couple of units over the 30 days.
So you're saying there, Joe, that we'll say if the 32 that you have on the top line there is basically what the recommendation is, if everything has been done as per the recommendation all along.
Yeah.
But the vast majority of people haven't been in that position, so there's probably a little bit of extra nitrogen still available that can be used. And like you said, it's a high performing machine. You want to put the fuel in the tank to deliver the speed effectively in the current situation, at the current stage, when grass is going to really respond to that application. Like there's no point in holding on to it for later in the year effectively, like.
Yeah. So, it's gonna, and again, it comes back to maybe some, you have a P allowance and the P allowance didn't go out earlier. Well, then, make sure it's an 18612 type product if you have an allowance for it, plus sulfur or something like that, just to get that bang of P to really kick on growth rate on your farm over the coming weeks. Like, so, it's worth, and again, it comes back to the recording on pasture base, or or making a good stab at what fertilizer you have out so far, and then then making a plan for the next couple of weeks in terms of trying to drive growth rates on the farm.
And Joe, just I suppose question in there, are you recommending to spread nitrogen on paddocks straight after cutting, and are you going to wait and see what growth brings if peak growth is coming? I presume you'll be in favour of driving on whenever the spreader is in the yard, or whenever you're spreading, that you just spread them anyway.
Yeah, well, I think so. Like, is in after cutting or after grazing, or how do you mean there?
After cutting is the question, actually.
After cutting, like, well, yeah, sure. Look at if you're cutting paddocks, get them moving again, like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's probably the big thing that no, it's possibly down to the way the year went, obviously, with the last 2 years, but we've kind of missed that drive through May and into early June, and that's kind of hampered farm performance across the whole year as a result. Because like last year, I very rough sums would suggest that because of the very dry conditions, we could have lost anything up to a ton of grass out of the whole year effectively in that period. So we really, we've got good conditions now to get a response to nitrogen, so people should take advantage of the opportunities to put it on over the next couple of days. Look, I think we're probably going to get a bit pressed for time, so we better move on to have a chat with Evan. So Evan, thanks for joining us tonight. Yeah,
Thanks a
everyone
million.
can
Thank
see
you.
your pride of place there on the right hand side,
Yeah.
having won your reward there a couple of weeks ago. So you're
Cheers. Thank
farming
you.
in Tubbercurry and you're in partnership with your dad, John. Tell us what's the story on the Hunt farm with the last couple of weeks, I suppose.
Yeah, so thanks a million. I suppose like everyone, we wanted to get out of that spring and winter as quick as possible. Horrid tough. Wet weather and cold didn't help the situation. Um, but yeah, I suppose just trying to get things back on track was the biggest concern. Kind of once we get to the end of April, started the second round was around 18th of April there. Like mightn't necessarily have been a growth problem, but like we were looking at a average farm cover of 1191. Cover per cow was 421, purely down to not getting grazing done really, or not grazing as much as we wanted. So like you were saying, I suppose we just had to make the call to try and stagger starting the second round so that everything wasn't coming at once now when weather did finally pick up. So like I suppose if you go back 2 or 3 weeks ago, we took out a few paddocks. It was actually frost at night, um, but we were bailing during the day, which didn't make much sense really. Like, but when it comes to a bit of heat in the soil now, the wedge is more uniform to be a wedge and not a block. So it kind of has us in a slightly better position now. We're still probably just a bit higher than I'd like. But as you were saying, the last few years we've been dipping our toes into higher stocking rates, and we won't be doing that again. I'll tell you that much. Three of a stocking rate for us is kind of our sweet spot. So we're not going to be afraid to go in with a more, do a bit of primo on top and take out more bales as we can. We're not really going to let paddocks build cover as such. We might designate the silage that comes off the platform as back end milking cow or dry cow feed if we don't think it's as good as quality. But yeah, so it's just about getting paddocks cleaned off and getting them going again for the next round. I suppose we
And
started. We
yeah, that's
started.
your current wedge there at the that people can see there. So you're going into 1400 covers, and you're saying that it's possibly getting a little bit ahead of you, maybe in that you've a couple of paddocks coming at you that are going to go over that 1400. That is what your
Exactly.
target is to graze.
Exactly, yeah. So like if you look at paddock, say 100 and 110 there, or 10 and 11,
Yeah.
like they're probably still 4 grazings away. 4 days at a growth to 60, they're going to be hitting the 15, 16, 1700. So to be honest with you, driving past them today with the warm rain that was falling, them thunder showers, it seemed to be growing in front of your eyes, really. Like,
Yeah,
so
and of course the average growth rate is the average. Those fields are probably growing closer to the 100 maybe in total, so they're really moving on ahead of you. But I
exactly,
suppose some
yeah,
people will look at that wedge then, Evan, and I suppose the reason I'll ask you this is just to see how you, as a winner in the competition, look at this to maybe compared to how other people are looking at it. There's a bit of a gap coming further down the wedge there now. Does that bother you, or what way are you looking at it like?
no, not necessarily, because as you were saying, like coming into peak growth, and paddocks, you know, they'll have a lower growth rate because they're just raised as such. So, a paddock with a cover of 400 or 500 is going to grow a hell of a lot quicker over the next week than a paddock just clipped at 50 or whatever. So, to be honest, that gap there is probably going to be my ideal grazing at 1400 in 10, 12 days. So I wouldn't get too excited about that just yet, anyways. Now listen, later in the summer, trying to stretch things out later in the year, definitely that gap there, you'd be thinking about slowing things up a bit now, but keeping her under the red line there for the time being, I don't see it as being a huge issue really, especially just trying to keep that quality there. Like,
Okay, and then just obviously you have quality grass in front of you at the moment when you're hitting the 1400s, but
yeah.
when you do see that surplus coming, what way do you deal with that? Do you go in straight away, take it out, or do you leave it run on the week, or like?
Yeah. So yeah, as it stands, like, we're doing walking the farm twice a week. Whenever we're bringing in cows, if they're being slow, I might hop off and just have a quick run around the paddock that we're passing by. So any, coming up around the 1300, I'll either write it on my hand or take it on the phone or send it into the WhatsApp, and it'll just be like, no, to keep an eye on that paddock over the next 2 3 days. That if cows aren't getting close to it, that it's more than likely going to be a baler job. So like, for example, they're now 10 and 11, or paddock 100 and 110. Like they're mowed out of it now, probably in the next day or two, if few hours came at all, mow them out of it and get them back into the ground. It's going to be good. If there was no rain promised, I'd probably leave them on the ground for the day, bail them up the following morning, the following day. But if there's rain coming, I don't see the issue of just bailing it up straight away, putting it in a stack that it might be a bit wetter than you'd like, but as long as you know that they're there and there mightn't have been a full wilt on it, it's still going to be excellent bright cow feed.
Yeah, so it's kind of management in the yard almost of the silage as it comes in as well. Like, and I think I've come across that comment from some of the good grassland managers that I meet as well in relation to, like, the minute it's cut, it's regrowing again. So like
Yeah,
it's small change in terms of it might only be maybe 10 bales or whatever, and they're a little bit in the damper side. They're not drowned wet. It's not the end of the world, like, necessarily. Your action is being taken to keep your grass right rather than being overly
exactly.
worried. And you can mix and match that silage anyway if you wanted to afterwards.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah. I suppose every decision we make on pasture base is purely for milk in the tank and not necessarily anything else. So anything that comes off that is, it's a surplus, or it's an extra, when you just deal with it whatever way you can then, like.
So talk to me about fertilizer based on clover percentage point that's there below the photo. How much of the farm is in clover now at this stage with you, Evan?
So at the minute there is, I'm thinking around 35%, maybe hitting 40. I suppose our platform is kind of always grown. So every year it's a lesser percentage until more ground comes in. So at the minute there's, say 40% for easy mats in clover. Of that, there's, a lot of it is reducing in. So as of the start of the second round, I was happy with the amount of clover that was there, really. I thought it was doing a good job, so it was treated as everything was treated the same, as in spring in, slurry, whatever way it fell. Once we got to the second round, then I pulled good clover paddocks back on chemical and just started following cows with dirty water, try and get tanks empty was the main thing, because to be honest, we didn't get any slurry out in January or February on the platform because it was just such a bomb of grass there, like. Um, so yeah, and then grass only paddocks are 0.8 of a unit a day, trying to match rotation length. The minute the cows are out, the fertilizer spreaders in, get it. If it runs into a surplus in 20 days' time, it's more bales in the yard, but it's grass that'll be there. It's awful hard to know what'll happen in 3 weeks, like. So you still need a surplus now, might be a bit of a hindrance, but in 3 weeks' time you might be looking for it, like. So you need to have it back in action again.
So just one final question in relation to the grass side of things there. You mentioned that you've been dabbling in the high stocking rate a little bit in the last couple of years, but
Yeah.
you've kind of decided that you're not going to, like you said, I think, did you say 3 was the figure that you're kind of happier with?
Yeah, so if we looked into fairly good detail as being part of the Focus Farms with John McCabe there, which was a good help. But like 3.11 is kind of our sweet spot if you look at the data side of things. But we call it 3 for handiness sake. Um, so like as you were saying earlier, like, yeah, you might be growing 100, maybe even 120 for 2 or 3 weeks of the year, but there's another 50 weeks of the year where you're not doing it, like.
Yeah.
And we got caught, not necessarily caught, but like, we've pushed the platform to 4.2, 4.5 at times, just with ground being out for seeding and coming back in. And it allowed us to try different things and to see what the farm could do. But it just meant we were losing production because every cow wasn't getting the maximum amount of grass. And like that, the meal lorry was coming in every 10 days, like, and it's just too costly. It just didn't make sense. So like, to be honest, we're in a lovely position there now. Three of the stocking rate is for us is just bang on, really, yeah, and it's makes the job a bit more enjoyable than knowing
Yeah,
that the
so
speed
you're
is
not
there.
on edge though, even is basically what you're saying, and you have flexibility in your decisions around. You could actually potentially decide to take out a paddock for reseeding if you felt it wasn't
Yeah,
running fine without putting the whole system under pressure, along with maybe a normal reseeding that you're doing as well.
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's it.
So Joseph has given me the old shunt ahead there now, so we have to move on to the winter feed element of it. So I suppose just from your perspective, you said about
Hmm.
that milking quality silage and then also the dry cow quality silage. You've a nice bit of silage actually put together already, even though it's only the 14th of May. And that quality silage, you've obviously set out your stall to try to get something that you like that in the yard for yourself. So tell us a bit about your kind of winter requirements first, I suppose, and then what you've done in terms of what silage you've made already and what your plans are for the rest of the season.
Perfect. Yeah. So I suppose just the stocking rate thing, it did push us to realise the importance of having good milk and cow silage. Whether it be the 20th of May to feed it or the back end of the spring, 75 to 80 DMD, it's not going to affect the tank as big as anything under 75. And it's amazing by even going in with a bale of how it can affect the tank. Like, so, like, our winter requirement really is total tonnage is 1,500, or say just shy of 1,600 ton, or 1,850 bales. Um, Out of that, I want 2 to 3 bales of milk and cow sort of feed per cow. So that's 160 cows for next year. Um, I have the guts of 400 bales already in there. Between, as you can see, there was 80 to 90 bales left over from last year, which was milk and cow feed as well. And there's 300 bales kind of made already this year. They're the first few days of May, or the second week of May there. So that ground now is like, it's, yeah, early May. Milk and cow feed is kind of ticked off the list, really. We won't say no to making more, that's for sure. But now the focus is on filling the silage slab as much as possible. And if we get stuck with a 6 month winter like we did last year, at least, not having to buy feed isn't going to be an issue. Like,
Yeah, okay.
so
Yeah, so and you don't want us to give out your number in case anybody's looking for the bales.
yeah.
So yeah, that dry cow feed in, like, where'd you set the bar for that though, Evan? Like, because I mean, sometimes like people they set out their stall for this dry cow feed and they end up with very poor quality feed in the end and end up
Uh,
supplementing it. So what do you call dry cow feed?
and I've done that as well. So for us, really is yeah. So like, to be honest, for like a 60 day dry period, a cow is under a lot of pressure for them 60 days to get back into peak condition for calving down. But she's still, 68 BMD, what I'm going to call straw, because I've made it before myself, isn't going to cut the mare either. Like, so at very minimum, you still want that leafy green grass, but you can just put your tonnage a bit more. So like 70, 74 DMD is kind of a very good dry cow feed to me. Obviously, you can watch your K and stuff to suit, coming up close to calving and stuff, but you just kind of have to manage that on its own sort of side. But the main thing for us would be trying to get a pit there now that'll feed, 160 cows for kind of 2 months of 70, 72 DMD sort of stuff. and then we can pick each side of that then with their 2 to 3 bales of milking cow for when they're actually milking. But condition, one thing for us as well, like space was always an issue. So we always had dry or longer dry periods. So we kind of got away with lesser quality silage because cows were obviously dry longer. But with sheds and stuff and accommodation becoming a bit more available to us, we 60 days dry is plenty good enough. But just to have that silage there and not have the cow not having her right for calving down is the main thing. Like,
And just one last question, I suppose, in relation to that good quality stuff that you have for the cows, is it kind of by accident or by design that you have the 300 bales of it there this year now, or is it part of a plan
no,
all the time?
to be honest, it was planned from really from, I suppose, the back end of last year is when we started planning on it. So young stock would have grazed. There was 54, I think it was 54 acres on one of the out farms down there. So young stock would have been grazing that, say half of it in before Christmas and then half of it after Christmas. Um, there were light stock, so they weren't really doing much damage. Now residuals weren't great considering the weather we had and stuff like that, but it was feeding young stock, but it was cleaning ground off to make this good silage as such. Um, so we cleaned that off. It got bagged. It's only for we have the quad spreader, to be honest, is the only way we got fart out on it. Um, Not a line here and there up the field. They're not the most accurate thing, but yeah, getting the furt out was the main thing. Getting it out early and being in position for we would have been able to cut it from the 1st of May onwards. It was just the way the weather was, and that dry spell came when it did. We were able to go and knock it, and knocked it on, I think, a Monday night. Tailed it out on the Tuesday and bailed it up on the Wednesday, and it got slurry on Saturday.
Very good. So you're ready to go again. So
Yeah, it's grown there now again, for the second cut, hopefully at the end of June.
okay, very good. So thanks a million for that, Evan. Joe, we'll
Okay,
jump across
thank
to you
you.
because we're under pressure for time, I suppose. Just while we're switching across to you there, just a point of clarification, just a question in there from someone, why 24-hour allocation as opposed to 36 hours? So just to clarify that that's just in a situation where we're tight for grass, that we're suggesting that people would give the full day's allocation and limit them to the 24 hours, whereas if you have surplus or if you have plenty of grass, 36 hours is still the recommendation. Okay, so Joe, you're going to talk to us about let's say the whole feeding situation. Evan has outlined his plan there. You're going to talk about what we need to do and why we need to do it, I suppose.
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. And I suppose before I go into that, just compliments to Evan actually for the situation after a tough spring. Like a lot of people on the front line, Evan, it's not been simple for the last 6 months or more, and to be in a situation where you're sitting at a good cover, relatively close to target cover. I'm assuming cows are doing what they're supposed to as well, that we didn't talk about, but
Yeah.
and the feed stocks are in good shape is like it's a testament to management. So compliments on that, because it hasn't been simple. So to land kind of, that's like a triple somersault and landing on your feet after a tough spring, which is fair play to you. So I think that's great to see now, to be fair to you. So excellent. Look at Stuart, and this is really just maybe re-emphasizing a lot of the points that Evan made. Like, I mean, look at, we talk about grass growth maybe backed by a ton of dry matter at least per hectare. This is an old slide. It needs to be updated, and we're talking about growing 15 tons and stocked at 2.5. Even at that level, we're saying that about 35% of silage would need to be quality, right? But all just from the simple slide, what we're just showing here is that as if growth rate is a bit lower and if stocking rate in the milking block is a bit higher, the amount of silage you need as quality is higher than what people might imagine. So it's over 50%, maybe 55%. And then if we add a reserve to deal with a spring like this spring, and looking at some figures on that for some farms, people ate the reserve of about 400 kilos of dry matter this spring, roughly 2 bales extra. That's what it looked like in a lot of farms. Add that in, you are moving towards kind of 65%, 2/3 of your silage having to be the type of quality that Evan described a couple of minutes ago. So, like, the idea now that we're sort of saying that the old idea that maybe what we did was make dry cow feed and then just have a few surplus bales to make enough quality. It's kind of shifted a bit the other way, we would say. So really look at it this way. Your silage, your 60, 70-day dry period at 12, if you count it up that way, let's even say 70 days dry at 11 kilos of dry matter per cow, somewhere between 800 kilos of dry matter is the dry cow requirement. Now, everything above that needs to be good quality. And I suppose, what are we saying? Why are we talking about it this week? I think the risk this year is people are under pressure for feed. Maybe think about the fact that we do need quality and we need a good annual production, and see where that. It's hard to make much of a change on silage management on this day in May, because the die is cast to some extent. But just remember, like, if there's an opportunity, maybe depending on what the weather's not great this evening, but if there was a time window maybe in the next week or so, which allowed you to get in and take out a good crop of earlier cut stuff rather than letting it bulk on for another week, it's probably the best decision to make. Go and take it, And maybe just one other quick thing, just to make a point around the stocking rate. If you find yourself in situations where struggling to get on top of grass quality over the next couple of weeks, and there's some area closed on the milking block, it's no harm at all to cut that as early cut silage, bale it out. Even if you want to let some of the main crop on the out block go ahead, why not just take out some of your, if you want to bring it, let's say I've seen it on some farms already, they've closed what they always closed, even though the growth rate is back. And they're maybe stocked at 4.5, 4.6 now, and the growth rate hasn't come to meet them.
Yeah.
In that situation, it'd be no harm at all. Like, say over the weekend, if you get a dry spell, take out your first cut area on the home block, drop the stocking rate a little bit, allow a bit of flexibility. I think it's a very good point in what was said about a stocking rate in around, somewhere between 3.5 rather than 4.5. No harm at all to split the first cut and deal with some of the bit on the home block somewhat separately to the main crop, which in a lot of cases is on an out farm now. Seems a bit of a crazy thing to say, but if you're a week or 10 days ahead and it fixes grass quality in the next round, it's worth doing. And you have put some quality silage away, and you have that growing back again. So look, it's just something to think about.
And
Okay.
Joe, just on that quality silage piece, I know you've been talking about it for a good few years. Like, it has to be that 5 to 6 bale cut is what you're talking about, and it actually has to be an area that like Evan has said there, the surplus that he might generate is probably more dry cow feed than dairy feed. And I saw you nodding there when we were talking about it with Joseph as well a while ago. Like, that's an important point, that this quality silage doesn't magically appear. Like, you have to actually set out your stall to get it.
Yeah, look, I've seen, like, even last week, seen some farms that have just a good tradition of making good silage. That first cut is already done.
Yeah.
And it's done, and maybe grazed late last autumn with young stock, maybe not grazed in the spring, got fertilizers, cut now and reset. And that will yield better over the year than stuff that's let run on, because it can go stale on the stem too. Okay. Now, I know people would say, well, you're going to miss out the bulk of the growth over the next couple of days or whatever, but you have to play that a little bit depending on the situation. But more like what really we're saying here is, rather than saying, obviously you've still another week, it's still only the 20-something of May next week. But what we're saying, not the 29th of May or not the June bank holiday weekend, I suppose, but maybe what I'm saying is, right, if you have stuff closed on the grazing block now and you're tight, if you've closed too much too soon, no harm in bailing some of that back out and bringing it back into rotation to fix a grass quality problem. If you want to let whatever's there already run on for another week, that's fair enough, but not 2 weeks and don't be looking to pile it high to solve a problem with feed availability, right? So that's what's kind of here, Stuart. Look, and these are stretched dates now. This is old work from Grange, but it still tells the tale. Late May cut, early to mid-June cut, late June cut, right? And the idea that we would delay the first cut to maximize silage yield. You can see there in a 2-cut system, generally what happens is you get a whopper of a first cut, obviously, as you go late, but a lot of the additional grass on that is not digestible at all. You're actually just cutting stem, and it's not digestible to the animal. And oftentimes when people say, well, I made a big first cut and I didn't run out of silage, the reason you didn't run out of silage is because the cows didn't eat it. They'll eat 2 kilos less of it than if it's quality. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's the lower intake as much as the extra yield. But overall, the message is clear. If there is a situation where we're short of feed, you will compound the problem by delaying your first cut to bulk it up. excessively delaying it, right?
Okay, so Joe, just a quick question on the cutting out that bit of ground early that you're talking about. I was expecting this one to come, but is there an issue with the nitrogen? Yeah.
Great question. We said, yeah, look, it's good, very, very good question, right? Now, I'll just say one thing, Stuart, right? You know the nitrogen strips we use to test it?
Yeah.
The nitrogen strips go up to about 600 on the scale. Like the nitrogen, it's a color change, right? But obviously the nitrogen is up to about 600 parts per million. You could still cut the silage, no problem, up to 900 parts per million. So even if that thing's glowing in the dark, you could still cut the silage, right? So we probably need to go to digital readers for this kind of stuff, but I wouldn't have an issue with that. If it's wilted, maybe Evan has a comment on that, but if it's wilted, it's dry, cut it, the higher nitrogen will lead to higher protein. It's not going to be a problem, particularly in a bale. Don't be waiting for the nitrogen to go out. So this 2 units rule thing, that's okay as a guideline for when to put out the nitrogen, but it shouldn't preclude you from cutting. Yeah, it's not, from cutting just to use up to 2 units per day. That's a real fallacy, and it does cause a problem. People delay too long because of this 2 units thing. Forget about it when it comes to cutting. You can sort of use it as a guideline when it comes to spreading. That's what I would say.
Yeah, like the conditions are probably will trump it, like Joe wanted. Like, I mean,
absolutely.
if you get, like you 100%. Said, if you get a dry week next week, you can knock it, like Evan has outlined there, knock it one night, throw it out, get her back in. They'll be in a good position.
So it's not a big deal. Now look, at just when we do talk about nitrogen and nitrogen application rates, and maybe there might be a bit of spare nitrogen knocking around in people's allowances, maybe in some cases, right? Just a quick point here. We keep saying you solve your feed deficit problems by focusing on the second cut, not on the first cut, right? So be thinking about that. And I know there's some place, I was down in the southeast today, we did a meeting today, and already people are worried about that, and particularly if there's a drought in the summer. But if there's going to be a drought in the summer, you better having the first cut taken later rather than earlier. You're better having it taken a wee bit earlier. The point on this slide, very simple, Stuart, is right, that we talk an awful lot about responses to nitrogen and what's the likely response to nitrogen, right? Just again, some of Pádraig O'Kiley's older work from Grange. Simple point here, right? Look at this is giving you the rate of response to nitrogen applied, first cut, second cut, third cut. But just look at the second cut for a moment. There's actually quite a consistent response to nitrogen for second cut, which makes sense because when is nitrogen going on for second cut? In peak growing conditions usually, right? So you will get a good response to nitrogen for second cut. First cut can be more variable actually because there's an awful lot depending on, a lot of more variable weather, let's say March, April, May than in May, June, July in most years, right? So what we're saying here, there's an opportunity, particularly when land is under your control, maybe you've land rented. The worst thing in the world you can do is pay big money for land and then put fertilizer on it because you're not diluting the overhead cost of the land. So just look at it and say, if you're short on silage, think again about, with an extra 10 kilos per hectare of nitrogen, if it's in your allowance and if your silage cut early this year, will that drive on the silage crop to be cut, let's say in mid-July, late July? Of course it will, right? And it's a good enough response. You get a response of about 16 to 1. So for every kilo of nitrogen you put out, you'll get 16 kilos of dry matter back. So when you add up the cost of a kilo of nitrogen versus to buy 16 kilos dry matter of feed next winter, it'll be good value for money to use the nitrogen up to your allowance. And if you space in your second cut to do it, no harm in doing that at all. Expect a response 15, 16 to 1, which is worth mentioning, I think, So look, I know Aidan, Lawless and Johnston talked about this many times over the years. First cut yield and second cut yield tend to be about the same. Not this big massive first cut and then a disappointing second cut. So first cut, second cut yield more or less are quite comparable. And the extra bit of nitrogen there, if it's in your allowance, is worth talking about. Okay, right. We'll move on, Stuart. Yeah, look, so just moving to the cow, first time we mentioned the cow all night. So just a question, it came up a lot in the spring about this peak, and we won't meet the peak, and if we don't meet the peak, we're goosed for the year and all that kind of stuff, right? Now, to some extent, there is some truth in that if you really strip cows back from a condition point of view, that you'll drop, production for the year. But I would contend that the biggest risk to production in the mid-season is only kind of manifest itself now, and it's going to manifest itself as poor grass quality, particularly as we try to sort out delayed grazing, not getting it grazed in the spring, maybe not getting, excuse me, maybe closing up too much silage to try and make, sorry, too much land to try and make silage, and running ourselves into a tight corner with grass quality. Okay. So just on the chart there, just to be, I don't want to be killing us with charts, but look at the top lines, right? That's kind of feeding no concentrate, 3 kilos and 6 kilos of concentrate for about the first 75, 80 days in lactation, right? So obviously you can see higher production on the higher input, right? There's a bit of a lag period, and after the line, the all cows went back to the same diet. Okay, so there is a bit of a carryover period with the extra production, but look after about week 16, week 17, which is kind of where we're heading to now. There's a convergence of the lines. So what I'm trying to say here is you don't get this parallel line just because you get a high peak doesn't mean that you're set up for the year. Just because you got a low peak doesn't mean you can't match what the high peak achieved, right? So what's more important for production in May, June, July, and August will be grass quality on the day it's grazed in May, June, July, and August. So what I'm trying to say here is don't overly worry about the fact that the cows haven't peaked as much as they would have. Think about fixing grass quality in this week, next week, and the week after, and you will get a milk yield response to that. Okay. And I don't buy it. I don't fully buy it that we're so much further behind on milk yield. Looking at a few herds, particularly the herds that did the heretical thing this year of putting cows out in bad conditions, their production is kind of similar to last year. So don't obsess about peak, obsess about grass quality. Okay, we'll move on.
Joe, just one quick question because it came in a bit earlier. Is a certain drop off in milk volume inevitable coming from 6 kilos of concentrate at the end of April where grass was tight, coming back from first rotation? Growth picked up now, so dropping back meal, but the volume is down is the question that's in there. So it actually ties in quite well with what you just said, probably. Yeah. Is it a factor of grass quality?
It could be a factor of intake and grass quality. Yeah, because 6 kilos of intake is, we look at it here, it's actually on the table here, right? So you're going to get a drop in milk production if you drop from 6 kilos back to 3-4 kilos. You will get a drop in milk production. We always knew this, right? There's no deal about that. The point is the drop in milk production worth more or less than the cost of the concentrate being used to drive the milk production? Isn't that's the question? Because
and
we're
it
at
all
6.
depends on the response rate then.
It depends on the response rate. So if you are at 6 and you're worried about them dropping back, if you fed 8, you'd still get a response probably. Why 6? Why stop at 6 at grass? We could go to 8 if we wanted, but will you get an economic? You will get a milk response, will you get an economic response, right? So look just want to make a couple of quick points here. I'm conscious of the time, right? So what we've just compared here, not to kill ourselves here too much, a 1400 cover and a sort of an 1800 to 2000 cover, right? That's kind of, so the top chart here is 1400 covers at 0, 2, 4, and 6 kilos a meal, and the same exercise with a good allowance of grass. So we're offering them up to this, hoping that they lead up to 17 kilos with good grass, and then your 2000 cover on the bottom, right? And on the top line, you can see there that in a 1400 cover, the first 2 kilos a meal will give you a milk response of about 1.1 in and around that, right? So it's 1 to 1 or 1.1 to 1. Fairly standard, right? Going from 2 to 4, it's the response. You're still getting a milk yield response. You're going from 26 up to 27.5. You can see 27.8. You're still getting a milk yield response, but the rate of response is more like 0.8. And when you go on to 6 kilos, you're still getting a milk yield response, but you'll probably the response to the extra meal is down to 0.6. If you went to 8 kilos a meal, your probably you'd be doing about 30 kilos of milk. Your response is down to 0.4. Okay, so the point here is that
the tank is going up all the time, so you're happy that that's kind of doing the right thing, but it's actually quite expensive milk then.
It could be expensive milk, and the problem here is, Stuart, and we've talked about this for a long time, right? If I'm getting a good response of 1.1 at the moment, the temptation is to sure I'll go another 2 kilos and still get a 1-to-1 response. You probably won't. You will get a 30% or a 20 to 30% less of response from where you start today. So every kilo extra will give you less. Okay, so if you look at it this way, if you buy a 10-ton bin, if you buy a bin of 10 ton of meal, right? If you feed that at 2 kilos per cow per day over a period of time, you will get more milk out of the ton. You will get more milk out of the bin than if you feed it at a 6 or 7 kilo rate, if you know what I'm saying, because the response to every kilo will be bigger. Okay, so look at the sweet spot there is we're saying this, we're not going to beat people up or beat ourselves up too much about the first kilo or two in the parlour, because it's probably carrying the minerals anyway, and it's getting, makes milking a bit easier maybe and all that kind of stuff. Not the end of the world, but when you start pushing up to 6 kilos, the response is actually down. Now, and Evan mentioned it, if we're in a situation where our grass quality is tricky or we're tight for grass and all the rest of it, we're almost forced into the 6 kilo feeding rate. And then the meal truck's in the whole time. Okay, so there's a nice balance there of that 3 point something that gives us that 2 kilo feeding rate. We're humming along. Cows are well capable of doing 2.2 kilos of milk solids, not killing them with concentrate, and it's a nice sweet spot, right? The more important point in the slide is actually, if you look at the bottom side, where we're into heavier covers, the first thing you notice is the intake of grass will be about 2 kilos less per day, right? And there's a lot of talk at the moment about seedgrass intake. It's down by, if you compare the zero unsupplemented grass, they will eat about 2 kilos less or thereabouts. There's a lot of talk at the moment about offering cows more grass, right? And rightly so, because when you look at pasture-based, our allowances are too low. Lots of people have 15 kilos of grass in on the system, and then they're saying 15 by 4 is 60 of a demand, when really the cows could eat closer to 17, which should be more like 70 of a demand at that level of stocking rate. So when we say setting our demand at 65, that assumes we're trying to get as much grass as possible into the cow. The point I'm trying to make here is that, there's no point in talking about increasing the grass allowance if the quality isn't 1400, because they won't eat it anyway, right? So no point in offering a big allowance of semi-grass. You won't get the intake anyway. So the point here is one thing. The basic intake of grass, driven by quality, will determine your sort of unsupplemented level of production. However, look at the responses. The responses are bigger with the poor quality grass. So if you're getting a milk yield response of 1.3, you'll get a high response on poor quality grass, or a higher response. So, sometimes we hear, I'm getting a good response to concentrate. You'll get a good response to concentrate if grass quality is poor, grass allowance is inadequate, and maybe if cows are thin. Not where we want to be, right? The best fed cows on that chart and the most economically fed cows on that chart are eating 1400 covers. They're eating somewhere between 16 and 17 kilos of grass, eaten, not allowed, but eaten, and they're probably have a couple of kilos of low protein mineralized concentrate going in. That's it, right? Now, we hear this sometimes, and I've seen it written again there recently this week. If I have a higher stocking rate, I should be going into higher covers. If I have a lower stocking rate, I should be going into lower covers. That's just the wrong interpretation. We should be sitting at 14 covers the whole time. And, based on our wedge is designed to get us into 1400 covers. That's the whole point of the exercise. So
Yeah.
stocking rate by allowance, by rotation length should add up to 1400. Not to say that if I'm heavier stocking,
let your pre-grazing be dictated by your
No.
stocking rate. Yeah.
if you're allowing your pre-grazing,
a high stocking rate is going to drive you towards the bottom of that chart there.
yeah, a high stocking rate. A high stocking rate does not mean that you increase the pre-grazing yield. A high stocking rate means that you reduce the allowance per cow, and you
Yes.
supplement the difference.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So that's a kind of a mistake people have been making, and we've made it ourselves to say, oh, stocked at 4.5, I should be grazing 1700s. Wrong. 1400s all the time. The cow doesn't care whether she's stocked at 4.5 or 3.5. All she wants is 1400 covers, right? Now, people will say, I'll run out of grass if I run the farm at a lower pre-grazing yield. No, you will run out of grass if your growth rate is too low. And if you're consistently running out of grass, it's not the pre-grazing yield that's causing it, it's your stocking rate that's causing it. Simple as that. Okay, and maybe Evan's point earlier probably is testament to that, actually, that it matches in well. Okay, so that's very simple. There's a reason we talk about 1400 covers and a couple of kilos of concentrate at most. It's the best balance of cow performance, cow health, and managing to maximize the grass utilized out of the paddock. Okay,
so Joe, that's kind of managing the
Yeah,
corn feed budget and so forth. Yeah, and
absolutely.
a little bit about the milk urea here, because that's cropped up a good bit in the last few days.
Milk urea is 80%, 85% explained by the nitrogen in the grass, Stuart. Simple as that. Milk urea has always fluctuated. We just weren't measuring it and reporting it on our texts, right? It has always fluctuated. The optimum level for whatever that is, the optimum level, somewhere between 20 to 35. I would say you can be on the lower end of that scale, down to 20 to 35, and it's still not causing a material issue to the animal, right? So I would say that, I would say that it does indicate maybe if you're heading into a drought situation, milk urea would probably drop. If you're coming out of a drought situation and you're into very lush regrowths, milk urea is probably going to rise. Okay, the natural fluctuation of grass will always cause an issue with that. Does it affect the cow? I suppose is the problem, right? And does it affect what's the impact on the cow? And I suppose the thing that people are legitimately probably worried about at the moment is, will it affect conception rate? Will it affect fertility? Or does it mean, what does it really mean? So here, just bear with me on this one. It's a tricky one, but if you look at what the 4 lines are showing here is, right, the pregnancy rate in the first 3 weeks and what is, and it's graphed relative to bulk milk urea. So one line is herds that had under 50% conception, herds that had 50 to 60, herds that had 60 to 65, and herds that had over 65. And what that line is showing is the milk urea levels, the milk urea nitrogen levels now relative to mating start date. And really what that's shown is, and there's a couple of studies to show this, at a bulk milk urea level, it doesn't relate that well to the fertility outcomes. Probably a good story for us because it will fluctuate. Should we be worried about it? We should be more worried about timing of AI. We should be worried about mineral status, particularly phosphorus in the cows at this day of the year. We should be worried about body condition. We should be worried about making sure that the problem cows, as in thin cows, twinners, anything like that, are sorted out and have either got their body condition on the right track or they're treated, with if they need any interventions, those are all done. Much bigger issues than the milk urea. This milk urea will bob up and down. Within the range of 20 to 35 or 38, I can't see it causing any major issue on fertility. Now, where you do see an issue possibly is, or we did see an issue previously, is if you had a very severe drought, 18, and we go out with fertilizer, we get no growth, and then we go out with fertilizer a second time, nitrogen fertilizer, and then suddenly we get 20 mils of rain. We get massive uptake of nitrogen in the space of a couple of days. Then we could see ureas jumping into the 40s and up to the 45 mark. You'd be concerned a little bit about that, but what you really should be looking at there is transitioning slowly out of a drought situation, right? We take a drought at the moment. We shouldn't say that. I was going to say we take a drought at the moment, but we that's not a good thing to say. No. So look at the way to manage milk urea, really, the one time it does have a kind of an indicative management. It has something to say about management is coming out of a drought, transition out of your drought feeding slower as the grass comes to meet you. That's the one place I would see it, but I wouldn't be stressing about it, lads, because people are ringing all the time. We're worrying about this. I'm not as worried. I'm not that worried about it, to be honest.
So just a quick question, I suppose, before you move on there. Does the herd producing the 2.2, 2.5 kilos of solids need higher allocations of grass dry matter per day over the herd milking 2? And how would you judge whether this is a 17 or a 20 kg dry matter intake per day then?
Very good question. Give them a little bit more. We never mentioned residuals, or I never mentioned residuals. Give them a little bit more for a couple of days and see do they eat it.
Yeah, it probably comes back to what Joseph was saying about let's say, giving them the 24, 36, 48-hour allocation depending on the paddock and just see how, I think it's a good way of judging it, how quickly
and
they
back
go through
calculate,
what you think. It kind of gauges your eye, but it also maybe gauges what their intake is like as well.
It does, and it leads back to your decision and then update pasture base when you have that done. Because if you have pasture base in that your allowance is 15 and the cows are actually eating 17 or maybe over it, your wedge is always going to be wrong at 15. You need to adjust your intake to allow the fact, that your demand is higher in reality than what you have on paper, if you know what I mean. The closer you have the paper to reality, the better it's going to serve you. So look at, and most herds now, most relatively high EBI herds with good solids and mature cows can go over 17 plus. Like you've seen it now. I was looking at a few herds earlier today that have massive genetics. they're stuck at 410, 420 solids. And they're still feeding a ton of concentrate, Stuart.
Yeah.
Maybe grass allocation is the issue. We are not, and be clear on this, we are not saying, and this is why milk yield is a poor predictor of profitability. It's a poor predictor of profitability because you can end up with 480 kilos of milk solids feeding 2 ton of concentrate or half a ton of concentrate, depending on your grass quality and your grass allowance. But make sure that the cows are eating as much grass as they can while keeping your residuals to 4.5. You can overdo the focus on, you can overdo the grazing pressure at some points, but you can see these herds coming out, and they don't have to be massive in their genetics for milk kilos. They're high milk subindex cows. You see plenty of cows with plenty of herds with negative kilos of milk, well able to do, up to the sort of 500 plus in solids on moderate amounts of concentrate if they're eating 1,400 covers of a good allowance every day. And them cows they'll pay the bills,
Yeah, I suppose the point with the 1,400, Joe, is that it's kind of right for the grass and right for the cow, as
Yeah.
John Martin says, in terms of the fibre content is just about right. And that fibre element, I think people underestimate that fibre element, and you talk about it regularly enough in relation to the silage, and we maybe don't give enough talk about it in relation to the grass. Like the fibre content is the limiting factor in terms of intake, like.
Absolutely. Fibre content is, the cow can only eat so much fibre, and it's fibre that limits intake, right? Now, we are not setting a target here, just to be clear, Stuart, of everyone has to be at 500 kilos of solids. What we're saying is, what I would ask the question a different way and say, right, if you're at 420 and you're feeding 1.2, 1.3 ton of concentrate, how much grass is getting into the cow in that situation? If you know what I'm trying to say. So just look at it, look at what your advisor, look at what your group. There's a lot of herds out there that they're probably overdoing the concentrate volume for the level of production they're getting. And we're not talking about trying to break production records here, but that 460, 470, 480 kilos of solids, that just might be as simple as an extra kilo of intake of grass per day. We're not trying to revolutionize the system here. An extra kilo of grass per day, believe it or not, is a lot of feed to the cow, a lot of extra feed to the cow, because it's all on production. Okay.
Yeah, so just one quick question on the milk urea there. So a person's just saying that they're down at 10 at the moment, even though they're grading 1450 on 36-hour allocation and feeding 14%. Is that a fertilizer issue?
It's possibly just a nitrogen uptake issue. That could change over the weekend.
Yeah, and it can change from paddock to paddock, sure.
Yeah, it can. Yeah. It can. But look, I just wanted to make the point that in the order of things to be worried about at the moment, grass quality, obviously cows in right shape for breeding, grass allocation and grass quality, a plan for winter feeds coming down the tracks. Milk urea is way down the list in my view.
Yeah, okay. So just talk to me about that plan for the winter feed situation then, Joe. So like you've always been strong on the budget, and that's no different in 2024. So you're advocating to people, like we have a bit of wet weather at the moment now, maybe take advantage of that wet hour to sit down and tot up what you're going to need.
Yeah, and if you don't want to do the numbers on it, start at 9 ton of cows, Stuart, and work back from there. Shocking figure. It's a shocking figure, but I would say start, instead of being all this calculating and all the rest of it, if you started at 9 ton of cow, I'm showing my northern inclinations there. But even to start at 8 ton of cow, like how many farms this year, heavily stocked farms in the south of the country that had a really tough time in the spring, they probably needed 8 ton plus to get through. So 100 cows, 800 ton of silage you need to get your hands on. If you have 800, you're doing well, and you're something like that, depending, more or less. So thing we can say is, first thing, bulking the first cut on the small area that we have, or the area, sorry, we've closed off. That won't solve the problem. We can't solve, if we're very short in silage, bulking the first cut will not close the gap. The only thing that will close the gap is probably a better second cut and maybe cut more area. And then look at some other options. We're not going to do this and we don't want to overplay this either, because like one thing I would say is, right, 13, disaster in the spring, no silage in the country. 18, disaster, no silage in the country. 2024, as bad a year as any of them. In most, there was enough silage in the country to get us through, which is great. And that's because people have budgeted and done those things. Like there's nothing new in any of this. It's just a reminder to say, look at, don't leave it until September or October to start thinking about it. Pick up stuff along the way. Take the opportunities when they're coming. Be active in the space, and securing 100 ton here, or at your typical scale of a farm, typical average scale of a dairy farm, 100 ton here secured or 80 tons secured there. That's a couple of weeks feeding when you really need it next year, right? And I would say one final thing: if you know you're going to be short, make quality and buy bulk and make quality, because you'll never be able to buy quality unless it's probably maize. But there's not, where are you going to get that for most people? A lot of them deals are already done. So look at it's now, it's geez, when you think about it, June, July, August, September, October, November, there's 150 to 160 days, hopefully, before we start feeding silage again.
Hopefully.
It's not that, yeah. So we have 160 days to get ourselves set up for the 160 days after that. So we're not telling people what they don't know already. Just be active, get out there, take some opportunities, and do your budget and work off. It's not a bad guiding figure to start with. 8 ton and work from there, I would say. All right.
Yeah, so I suppose the question for both yourself and Joseph there, and maybe Evan, you can jump in as well if you want to, and any advice in relation to paddocks that were poached after the spring and are quite rough. Will it affect production of grass for the rest of the year?
If it was poached once, probably not. Phosphorus, background soil fertility would be a big one. It is. I've been quite surprised at some of the degree to which some paddocks have recovered. Now, we don't want to be ploughing the whole farm, but in some cases where people pushed it a wee bit in the spring, you're always going to do damage on a paddock or two. They have recovered very, very well, but they've recovered better if the soil phosphorus levels or the phosphorus supplied where there's an allowance for it is there. I think that's the big one. So maybe, lads, anything to add to that?
I suppose the thing, Joe, is probably to use the slurry maybe where people don't have the allowance as well, or the dirty water. Evan, what have you done? We'll say any paddock that you found was a bit damaged maybe.
There was plenty of them. Yeah, like that. Slurry, fertilizer where we could, but like we do find cows do walk in damage, very, very well over the space of the second and third round. On space with 52 cubicles at the milking parlour. We missed, I think, 4 days and 4 nights since the 5th of February of grass. Like, now we had paddocks for sacrifice, pretty much the new milking platform that I was on, that we went to for really wet periods. But like, we did do damage. We done damage in October, but to be honest, it hasn't affected it. Like, cows will walk it in on a dry May week. Like, the cows will fix it themselves, really. And as long as your indexes are right, your lime is right, your grass will power through, really. Like,
there's damage and there's damage. Like, I think there's probably, like, you're cautious. You stayed off it when you couldn't definitely graze, but you were on off you were getting them back off it as quick as possible. Then, depending on the situation, obviously, to make sure that they didn't plough it. Like,
yeah, exactly. Like, nothing was, it needs to be reseeded, but there's paddocks are black, but a shower of rain, it washes off, puddling and stuff. Like, that fella might go around with the bucket of seed, and he'll spend the day doing a few corners here and there, but it's all fixable, and the cows do a lot of it themselves, really.
yeah, okay. Joe, there's a question in there. What does 8 ton of winter feed equate to in bales?
Well, sure. 800 kilos, 10 bales or thereabouts.
Yeah. And then I suppose coming back to you, Joseph Dunphy, based on the presentation that you've shown, the question is, with the growth rate of 65 to 70 for May and June, milking platforms should not exceed 3.6 livestock units per hectare to achieve 1,400 cover for cows. Is that correct? Is quite literally the question.
Yeah, well, it's yeah, like it's look, it's it's come back to what Joe said. Like it's no matter what, we have to just be targeting the 1400s. Like that's what's we want to try and maintain that peak, keep quality grass in the diet, and it's just going to be going into them 1400s all the time and taking the surpluses out as they come.
Okay.
Very, very simple.
Yeah, so Joe, another question that I probably had anticipated as well. Said about getting the bigger second cut last year and cut early on the 10th of May, and then the ground burnt up for a month after cutting. What do you do in that scenario?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. What do you do in that scenario?
There's nothing you can do, Joe. Like, I mean,
there's nothing you
that's
can
just
do.
unfortunate.
There's nothing you can do.
Yeah.
No,
And
because if
no
you cut,
2 years
if you
are the
if you
same,
cut,
so like
no.
that's the
What can you do? Like you cut a couple of weeks later, and then it sits there. Even it'll still sit there. Yeah. It has never really. There's people who decided to cut already, and they're back green.
yeah.
So it's what's early and what's late. But look at lads. The main thing I want to try and just get across, Stuart, is to look at playing around with plus or minus a week on playing around with plus or minus a week on cutting date will not solve a problem. If you're 20% short on feed or you ran out of silage this year, adjusting your cutting date by a week or so, delaying it by a week or so won't fill the pits.
Yeah.
It won't. It's down to probably more area for second cut and more area overall. Unfortunately, it is. And maybe, and I know we have to be just careful on this one, but if there's millionaires there's cows that are a million of a cell count at the moment, and cows that are always at the back of the line and too lame and all the rest of it. Stragglers, an early cull of stragglers will help if you're very, very short in silage and struggling to fill the difference. It's not too early certainly when you're facing into a winter where you might have to buy a lot of stuff, milking, poorly productive cows this week, next week, the week after, the economics of it aren't great, but that's only for a small percentage of cows let's say in a fair percentage of herds, actually. Don't neglect the demand side of the equation as well, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, so Joe, we better wrap it up there. So I suppose just to summarize what we've done tonight, and the key messages for people to take away is that in order to try, so you're saying that maybe the peak milk isn't back as much as people are talking about, but if people are concerned about their peak milk, the most important thing that they can do is put high quality grass that Joseph Dunphy is talking about there in front of them, and make sure that they have plenty of it for the next number of months, and that will drive solids by better constituents and actually maintain milk yield as well. So, and I suppose it's coming back to that point about the wrong wedge versus the right wedge. That wrong wedge, even though you have a lot of grass on the farm and you think you're kind of comfortable with it, it's actually hampering you because of that fibre content in the grass, reducing the intake of grass. And that's why you get the response to the concentrate then when you do put it in. So your ideal scenario is probably 2 to 3 kilos a meal plus that high quality grass of 1400 that Joseph was talking about. And that's going to drive performance throughout the summer. Good for the cow and good for the grass as a plant itself as well, as I said. And then I suppose the last point, don't get too hung up about the little quirks in the nutrition of cows at the moment, especially around the milk urea. Concerns maybe about milk fats fluctuating up and down as well. That happens every year as well, especially as we move into kind of that better quality grass, which just has that maybe different lipid content as well. So probably no need to get concerned about acidosis there, Joe. It's really just a kind of a transition to the type of grass that you're on. Feed a bit of fibre maybe if people are concerned about it. No major need for huge buffers or anything to be going in. Genetics is a big thing to play there as well. And then the final thing is just to sit down in the next week or 10 days, do that budget in relation to what you need for the feed. And as you said, Joe, if you want to do it simple, just do it on the basis of a large figure and work backwards and try to get there. It's people will be there to help people. Obviously, the BIS campaign is finishing up tomorrow, so advisors will hopefully be getting back to what they like doing at that stage instead of filling out forms. But they'll be able to help people to complete the fodder budgets and so forth. And just then once we have first got done, match that up to what's the gap going to be like after that, and what do we need to be doing, and moving early rather than waiting until there's no options left. So again, I failed in my efforts to try to finish this in an hour, but again, we've had constant audience, which is always a good sign of the content of the webinars. I think that when people stay on, they're very happy with what they're hearing. So delighted to have everybody on again. And I suppose, Joe, we probably might consider doing something again like it in a couple of weeks again, maybe, or something along those lines. Kind of timely reminders.
Absolutely, and look, absolutely, probably later in the season when we get the fodder surveys done, Stuart, and look at, there's probably stuff we didn't get covered tonight, or there's stuff that people are shouting at the screen saying, here, that's ridiculous, or whatever else. We want to hear that too. We're open for discussion. We're not. It's about discussion, and it's that's what we want the forum to be. So look at, if there's anyone that wants to have any feedback or anything like that, or any suggestions, just drop us an email. Just drop us an email, and we'll try and do our best to cover any additional concerns or anything like that. So very good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, lads. Thanks very much for everyone for joining in, and best of luck with the next couple of weeks. Thanks, Evan.
Thanks, lads. Thanks, Evan.
Thank you.